Welcome to Unlayered. Today we are joined by Alex Thorn. He is the head of Firmwide Research at Galaxy Digital and formerly headed up both blockchain and venture efforts at Fidelity. But most importantly, he's been a Bitcoiner for over a decade now. Alex, what's up, man? How's it going?
Saul, great to be here. Dave, good to see you. Great to be on Unlayered, man. I'm a fan of this podcast, and I've been listening since day one.
I can't believe it's already been a few months since we launched this thing, and we already have some competitors, it seems, that popped up.
Oh, yeah?
So it's a very exciting space that we're in, next generation blockchains.
Often imitated, never replicated, unlayered.
Kind of on that point, actually, you've spent a lot of time, I think, looking at other layer ones. We've all witnessed that the rise and fall of multiple layer one ecosystems. But do you have a view broadly on layer ones? I know you did a report, or actually we kind of did a report back when I was on the team at Galaxy. Have those views changed since you wrote that? What do you think?
You know, we were just thinking about that. Yeah, the report was called Ready Layer 1, Ethereum and its Smart Contract Competitors. The thesis, this was December 2021 that we published this, and I think the thesis was that it was Ethereum's game to lose, basically, in terms of, and that wasn't a controversial opinion. I mean, I think when it comes to the global decentralized world computer use case, you know, we had set Bitcoin aside. We said Bitcoin doesn't compete with ETH, and despite what the ultrasound money boys say, Ethereum doesn't compete with Bitcoin on what Bitcoin is good at. So we'll just set that aside. And then we said, you know, in terms of a smart contract platform, that Ethereum was clearly the leader and that it was up to these challengers to, you know, dethrone it in an innovator's dilemma, right? Can the upstart overthrow the incumbent and all the stuff that goes with that? I think, you know, we were just thinking about this yesterday, and I think that thesis is only strengthened. I mean, now with the layer 2 L2 season that we're in, and the broad decline of many of the alt L1 communities since, you know, the bear market, I think it's only gotten stronger, the case for Ethereum. Again, not on technical merits, not on any of the true fundamental, just purely on the adoption alone, that I think it's only gotten stronger, honestly. And I think this is one of the things that I've always been interested in Solana about, as an example, you know, given the sort of focus of this show, is that it is meaningfully differentiated from a technology standpoint. It's not an EVM clone, right? It's not. And so that has always remained interesting to me. And I think even in this bear market, that Solana is one of the only other like platforms that has an ongoing community. Like, I mean, if you look at the list of ones we wrote about in that report, it was 10 competitors, and was like Cardano and Phantom, and like, did none of these things matter at all now, right? And look, to be fair, Solana matters a lot less than it did, but it is technologically interesting, and it does have a resilient community, and most of them don't, right? I mean, a lot of those alt L1s were just additional block space, like spilling out outside of ETH, right? And those fees were high, and you needed somewhere to go. And I feel like with the L2 season, I'm calling it, even though most of these things are, you know, not decentralized and not ultimately not good yet, you know, the market doesn't care that much. You talk about like Base, right? I mean, it's literally a OP stack clone, like totally centralized. It's given more block space to ETH people, and like that's good for them apparently. So I think it's only strengthened that thesis that it's Ethereum's game to lose in that general smart contracting, you know, sector.
What would you say to the suggestion that in crypto we've only really had minimal product market fit so far? And I would say it's in some fairly limited extensions of DeFi, and then also probably GambleFi is the best way to clarify it. And given Ethereum's greater liquidity, it's obviously winning at those two things. But do you think as we have more use cases proven out, do you think that thesis of yours will stand the test of time, basically? For example, if DePIN starts proliferating, gaming, social, payments, things like that.
You know, I stand here waiting with arms open for these use cases to present themselves, right? I've been hearing about these supposed mythical additional use cases for years, right? I mean, even take like Solana as the example, right? It was high throughput, supposed to be able to put, you know, financial stuff on chain at the TradFi scale. Solana's an NFT platform today, as we know well, right? It's almost exclusively the activity on Solana is NFT related. And that was the case during the bull market. Well, you didn't need 60,000 TPS for that, right? And the same thing, people come to me, I was talking to some investors who invested in some recently launched high throughput L1s. And I was like, why? Like, we don't need more block space right now. We need applications people want to use, which is kind of what you're referring to, Dave. It's like these actual, we need applications, right? We don't, there's that block. I don't know if you guys saw the, put out a story on like the blockchain protocol ecosystem, and they did one of their market maps, and it's just like all the L1s, and there's just like a bajillion of them, right?
It's like 300.
Yeah. And I'm asking this guy, he's like, well, but dude, there's some use cases that like, we can't do without like this higher TPS. And I'm like, dude, that's the same thing every alt L1 investor has been saying for literally 6 years. That's what people said about ETH. That's what people said about Solana. Like, where are these supposed mythical use cases? Like, so I stand, like I said, I stand with open arms, waiting to see them. I'll acknowledge them when they appear, but I just don't see the world really demanding blockchain use cases outside of native crypto assets. I don't see it. I'd like to see it. Tokenization is a great example. Like, I've been following tokenization since like 2015, and like, I guess now we have a little bit of real world assets leaking their way into DeFi, but like, there is no challenge. DeFi is posing zero challenge to TradFi today, right? It's almost exclusively exists so that people that own crypto assets can do financial services. For example, the Curve guy, if he had, I promise you, if Fidelity would have loaned him dollars on his Curve holdings, he'd have done it there. Like, the only reason for DeFi is because there's assets you can't use elsewhere. At the moment, it's posing zero challenge to the traditional world. There is no overlap. It is solely an enclosed community. If we throw the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks, like games, not one game. Show me one game that has adoption, right? There isn't even one. We all get the thesis, digital collectibles and truly own and then trade your Fortnite skins. Like, we get that. That makes tons of sense. But there isn't one. There's not even one that people love at scale, right? When I see that one, then I'll agree with you that that's a use case. Like, but I don't see it. And again, DePIN, like, dude, no one, I don't care what anyone says, no one needs helium. There's no one on earth that can't get a cell phone, dude. You can get cell service in the Sahara Desert, okay? There is no need for it whatsoever. It is completely a solution in search of a problem. Now, do we like it? If we had rebuilt stuff from scratch, would we have it be more decentralized? Absolutely, right? We're not wrong, but it's like you're hunting around with a solution in search of a problem on so many of these things. That's why I stay and to me, it's like, we know there's a use case and demand for Bitcoin, and it might be a narrow use case, a non-sovereign money, sure. And then I just look at the entire other pile as like, okay, it's a broad-based bet on any of these finally working, right? Like DeFi, tokenization, GameFi, DePIN. Sure, I think some of them will work, and we're not sure what. So like, that's the thesis for any altcoin to Bitcoin, is just like, one of them will probably hit, and it won't be on Bitcoin. So I don't know. That's a long rant, Dave.
I think out of those, the one that I would really push hard against would be the DePIN argument, because currently you have these infrastructure industries, which are absolutely dominated by behemoths. And if you want to get your foot in the door, you need to spend billions, hundreds of billions, just to be able to access the competition. And I don't think that's good for customers. I don't think that's good for consumers. And you mentioned helium. Obviously, that's one of several options. But I think one thing that they are doing, I mean, firstly, it might not be possible to roll out 5G using these traditional centralized players, just because you have to have the cell towers so close together. Those, it's hugely, hugely expensive. And secondly, it's about costs ultimately to the customer. If you just have like one massive corporation that can achieve this, they can charge whatever they want. Whereas suddenly, if you can introduce competition, that's great. And likewise, if you can reduce the upfront costs of the company building out, as you can in the case of helium by like 95%, because ultimately the people who are building out the network shouldering those costs, then you can offer a lower cost to the customer. And I think they've just rolled out their $5 unlimited package. So I would push hard against the DePIN argument, but I do largely agree with a lot of the other stuff that you said.
No, I hear you. I just don't think of yourself as an advocate for free markets in this analysis, Dave. Think of yourself as a person trying to buy cell service. It's not expensive, dude. It's not expensive at all. It's dirt cheap. You can get $15 a month cell service, right? Ryan Reynolds sold his company, Mint Mobile. They were offering $15 a month. There is no demand. I refuse to believe that. Sure. Okay. Yes, we agree. Monopolies, like, there's probably some math we could show that, like, if AT&T were broken up, it'd be a little cheaper. Dude. And also, there is no issue rolling out 5G. I refuse to believe that. There's 5G all over New York City. It's not expensive. Like, they're easily dropping. It's everywhere. I live in a second or third tier city where I live, and there's 5G everywhere. There's literally everywhere. There's no issue with this. It's completely made up helium hopium that there is a demand for this. I promise you, dude, like, no one on earth, you can literally get a SIM card in Nairobi and go into the desert and the phone works, dude. Like, there's no need for this from a consumer standpoint. What are you going to save? $2? Like, keep in mind, for an innovator to overthrow an incumbent, we need at least a 10x improvement, and it just isn't there. I'm telling you, I'll be shocked. And I'm willing to eat these words if helium is a success. Shocked. I think that's just total hopium, dude. I completely disagree. Completely. Sorry,
I will say that
it's early in the morning. I'm being silly.
We love it. The 10x framework is actually something I reference a lot when I say, how does crypto improve X, Y, or Z application 10x over an incumbent? So I totally agree with that point. One quick point, though, is that the 5G in New York is actually not that good. It actually isn't that good. You're right. It's actually, the service in New York is actually kind of slow. And as ridiculous as it sounds, I actually reactivated my iPad, which is only 4G, and it has more like regular service in certain areas of the city.
No, I mean, we're down, I'm down like in Battery Park area, and actually the service is terrible here for some reason. I don't know why. So yes, okay, fair. But again, I just don't see the, I just simply don't see that, like, dude, first of all, helium, let's also be fair, okay? Helium launched in 2019, dude. It's been almost 5 years, okay? Like, we, oh man, it takes so long to build, blah, blah, blah. No, dude, this thing's a failure. They're on their third reboot attempt of it. Like, I mean, come on. How many, like, in 2 years when they say, oh, actually, we got to go after this thing now. Are you going to be on that train too, Dave? Like, how many times are you going to give these people an opportunity to fuck up and do it correctly? Like, honestly, like, my God, dude, like, it's not just, and I like the idea, to be clear, again, I'm a massive supporter of decentralization, as I hope the audience understands. I'm being particularly critical for fun, like, I'm actually super, super interested in if helium or something like it, if we take connectivity or whatever other use cases we want, could be successful. I just want people to be realistic about, like, the problems and the solutions, right? And when you think about a blockchain, like, a blockchain is ideal for settling value between unknown parties, right? Or even enemies, right? The meme, one of the memes is Bitcoin is for enemies, right? Not only parties you don't know, but maybe you know and can't trust, right? And actually are enemies with. Like, that final settlement is what blockchains are great for. Like, let's be realistic about which use cases then make sense for that, right? Like, we don't need, so that always the joke when people are like, oh my God, no one's using Bitcoin. Until I can buy coffee with my Bitcoin, it's a failure. Dude, nobody needs their coffee payment stored on a global, decentralized, immutable ledger for the next 100 years. Like, that's actually not a huge use of this technology, right? Like, it could be, don't get me wrong, if you don't have financial services or payments options, then sure, a global open free money network makes sense regardless of it. But let's be very, very real about when a blockchain makes sense for a use case also. It's a great point I want to bring up about gaming. Dude, nobody needs their skins on an immutable database. Like, nobody needs that. The only reason to do it is because we already have a global, decentralized, international marketplace on this internet of value. So yeah, sure, bringing more assets into it makes a lot of sense. But no one is out here, except for Ninja, that one time they, like, wiped his Fortnite account or whatever, or Vitalik with his, what was his sword or whatever, bricked by the developers. Like, it's minor. I want people to focus on what the really, really big opportunities are. And sure, I get at scale a DPIN, a decentralized connectivity network. It's something I wish we had. Is it going to be good enough to go anywhere? I just, and don't tell me cost, dude. Cellular is dirt cheap worldwide. Dirt cheap. Literally, you can buy a SIM card for like $2 at an airport in any country on earth. Like, there's no cost savings to be had for the consumer here. Maybe it's $1, maybe it's 10%. I refuse to believe that there is, though.
It's definitely cheap overseas. I'll concede that. US, I guess it depends.
Well, you can get those cheap carriers. Like, my AT&T is pretty expensive because I've also refused to re-up my thing, and I've been hanging on to my grandfathered unlimited data plan, which apparently I don't need to because they offer it again. It's pretty expensive, but you can get like, what are they? It was like, I don't know, my mother-in-law is always telling me about some cheap one that she wants to get. And we're like, no, dude, you need like one that works. You need like actually a good one. But there's like all these like cheap, Mint Mobile was that example that Ryan Reynolds sold to T-Mobile. Like there was $15 a month plans. Like there's tons of cheap plans.
Yeah. I guess it's usually like low usage, like maybe a gig a month or something.
Yeah, that's again where I push back. I'm not sure I've ever seen unlimited for $5. I think I'm over in the Europe, and I think it'd be more like 20 to 30, something like that. And also, I don't think that mobile carrier is something which has a huge moat. I mean, I think when you're shopping around, you just go onto these comparison sites and go for the cheapest one. And so if you've got something which is...
Yeah, they're all, by the way, I just Googled too. It looks like they're all like $30 a month for unlimited.
Are you pulling back from this argument? Or,
No. I mean, I'm saying, dude, literally every person in the world, every person in the United States, people on food stamps still have iPhones with service. Like the poorest people in America have cell phones. So like, I'm just saying like there's a very, very, I don't know who you're really targeting here. Sure. Would they rather pay 15 instead of 30? I'm sure they would, but like, that's the case. Like that's the use case.
That is a fair point. It doesn't gain a new user base necessarily. It just reduces cost by a factor of 2 to 3. It seems like for that particular user base, which
seems like a cool startup that like they should sell to like, AT&T. That's what I would say if you pitch. If you pitched helium to me in a vacuum today, that's what I would say. You've created an interesting hot spot that maybe you can sell to the big carrier. Good luck. That as a venture investor, that would be my guess. But also, like, I mean, let's be real, right? I mean, again, to my point about helium specifically, like, dude, didn't everyone who ran the prior iteration of this project, they all lost money. They never worked. Those hotspots, dude, like nobody ended up like using it at scale. This is like like, I'm just saying, how many reset attempts at this are you willing to give the same team? I mean, come on. I have to be skeptical of it overall. Like, when somebody fails, like, I'm not saying they can't come back and succeed, but I mean, like, we're starting from that base. Like, let's be fair.
That's fair. Let's actually kind of invert this.
Mega spicy take. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
How do you see adoption coming forth? And let me preface this by first saying, like, I think it's a bit interesting that we started with DeFi, because historically financial markets don't come until much later, but we kind of inverted the order of operations here. And like, that was like the first use case on layer 1 blockchains like Ethereum. And obviously Bitcoin is kind of like that global monetary digital ledger, as you mentioned before. So like, how do you envision adoption kind of happening?
Well, it's a great question. And it's a tough question. I really should say when I say it's a great one. Look, DeFi, you're right. It is, I would say, actually, the fact that DeFi is one of the big use cases this early in the, crypto story is actually a testament to the lack of other use cases. Again, it was like, well, we have these assets, right? We built these networks. And in the case of Bitcoin, it's the asset is the product, right? But, ETH wasn't founded that way. It was supposed to be oil for the world computer, right? Gas to pay it wasn't supposed to be an asset. It was supposed to be a platform. Well, it turned out there wasn't anything good to build on the platform. So they were like, crap, let's build stuff for people that own the asset, right? Because that's the only people on the platform are people that own Bitcoin, they own ETH, right? Like, so it's the financialization of the app layers, to me, is a reaction to the lack of real world use cases. And you're always going to have DeFi. But this is my point about DeFi today. Like, I used to say in 21 and 22 that DeFi was obviously interesting, but it was, at the time, it was just deep pocketed whales rehypothecating to each other. There was no organic usage. No one was, taking out a loan on DeFi to buy a house, or whatever MakerDAO argued originally when they launched was like that you could literally buy a boat because you could borrow off your crypto. No one did that. Like, no one really was using it for finance. It was all because you owned crypto assets and there was nowhere for you to do finance with those assets, right? So they built, and to me, that is still the case. And I think it is, I don't see anyone moving from TradFi to DeFi. I don't see anyone, plenty of talent is, I don't see anyone saying, gosh, you know what? I was going to do this thing at JP Morgan, but instead I'll do it in DeFi. No one is saying that, right? And I hope that can change one day. I would love to see, non-sovereign or self-sovereign finance become more integrated into our actual global financial economy. I think we all would like to see that. I don't know obviously we know why it hasn't on DeFi yet, right? I mean, there's regulatory and there's throughput issues, which I don't think are going to be a big deal. Again, you can just spin up like innumerable L2s. Like, once somebody figures out how to make these L2s like decently decentralized, it's block space is not a restriction in my mind to any of these use cases, really, despite what some new L1 investors have told me. So stepping back, dude, broad adoption. I think honestly, the most likely case is for, Bitcoin and maybe ETH as a stakeable asset, or just owning them. That's the ETF. That's going to be the broad adoption to start, right? If we think about, this is what I really admire about the Solana community. And while I'm, coming out the mega spicy take to Dave's DPIN question, like, the Solana community is trying to build blockchain use cases, and I respect the heck out of that. I'm just continue to be mega bearish on. I just haven't seen any take off ever, and I've been looking since 2014. So I'm not writing the nail in the coffin on it, but I really respect that, because it's not solely about an asset and building DeFi for that asset, right? Like, there's a lot of people who think that it can be things like decentralized physical infrastructure or gaming use cases, and all that stuff makes a lot of sense, and it's admirable. I'm just like, I don't even want to say I'm cynical. I guess I'm cynical. I'm not skeptical. I'm just straight up cynical about it. I've seen so many pitches on these types of things, and so few, if any, ever actually come to fruition. I think the primary use case for crypto is owning it and trading it today, and that will be good enough. That will get, a Bitcoin ETF will get like 20% of investors worldwide to have exposure to Bitcoin. Like, and that's adoption. Beyond that, like, I just, again, like, I like digital collectibles, but do we really think big brands are going to have like token gated parties? Like, I mean, come on, dude, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, man. Coca-Cola.
You need people to go to parties, not the other way around. You don't keep people out of parties. Like, anyway, I'm just saying, like, on all of these big, the big other sectors obviously have been DeFi, NFTs, gaming, I guess you can say DPIN now, but I love that you guys broadly, Web3 type, particularly, like, you had Kyle on your show, like, was that last week or the week before? Like, DPIN, this didn't exist. You guys just invented this like 6 weeks ago, this phrase DPIN, right? Like, this is like, no one was calling it DPIN in 2019. Where did this phrase come from? It's a good one.
It was from the Selkis report. He does it every year. I think. Was
it last year's one?
This year, I believe it was this year. I could be wrong.
Or like 22, 23?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he coined it.
All right, so it's 9 months old or whatever.
Yeah. It stood the test of time in some ways.
I want all these things to work, to be clear. Like, when I talk smack about Helium, I have no ill will towards that team, and it very well might work. I mean, I'm not. This is just this. I mean, you know what? Honestly, DPIN's not even close to the worst one. It's tokenization. I can't tell you. We joked. We looked at 18 and 19 when I was doing venture. I think we looked at 30 or 40 tokenization platforms. And this was like the Harbors, the Templims, the currencies, the securitizes. Some of these are still around and have found ways to make money, no doubt. I don't. But at the time, this was such a hot idea, and we joked that we had looked at more tokenization issuance platforms than there were token issuances. Like, there was like 2 ever, and we looked at 40. And every person was like, we're going to tokenize real estate. We're going to tokenize. And it was like, dude, like, show it to me. Where is it? It's like Ahab's white whale, forever in search and never finding, or the Holy Grail, right? No one ever finds the Holy Grail. Everyone's looking for it. It's like, I hope we eventually find it. I would love to own my assets on a public blockchain more than just at a trusted third party, which, as Nick Szabo says, are security holes. Like, I totally agree with that. I just don't see it yet. And I want to be really realistic about, again, I'm also not in a venture role, so I don't have to have these grand visions of what could happen. I'm here looking for traction on the ground today. And I just don't see it in many areas that people, blockchain evangelists think it'll happen.
I wonder how much of this isn't people's desire not to use these tools, but is rather the friction that's being created through largely regulation. Trying to move your money onto crypto rails is painful. Trying to tokenize real world assets, because I agree, probably real estate's too non-fungible, but something like bonds, for example, or stocks. If they had coin on easily tradable on crypto rails, I'd be buying coin right now. As it is, I have to set up a Robinhood account and I just can't face it. So as a result, I'm just going to have to watch it moon over the next few years. So I think there is demand, at the very least, from the crypto community that's sat on those crypto rails. Just the existing crypto community is big. I mean, there are millions of people that own crypto, and that alone is a reason for it to exist. This is one thing where I tell people, I'm like, we don't need that unicorn use case. I mean, a counterpoint to what I talk about when do you need a blockchain is that, well, who cares, dude? There's millions of people that want to use a blockchain. Forget whether they need it. They just choose to use it. And that's a big market. And I agree.
And look, stocks and fungible financial assets make tons of sense. Everyone knows this. The DTCC, which is the central repository for stock certificates in the US, they wrote a paper in like 2015 that was brilliant. And it was about how essentially their entire existence should be disintermediated by the blockchain. And they're totally right. Like and as we all know, public blockchains are phenomenal for recording and affecting the transfer of digital property. Like they're phenomenal at that. And so, yes, the primary barrier is regulation. And of course, with regulation comes incumbents, right? I mean, the regulators regulate the incumbents and sometimes advocate for them, right? So no doubt, if there was a fully green field here, we'd be doing a lot more on public blockchains right away. Regulation is one of the core, and I don't want to say, I shouldn't even say regulation. I should say rules, existing laws and rules are hostile to decentralized free and open source software overtaking their, moated financial system. That absolutely is true. The DTCC was completely right, by the way, and they have a great paper. I actually encourage everybody to go read that paper. It's literally, was it 2015 or even 14? It was one of the earliest blockchain papers, and they hit the nail on the head. And again, we've seen no movement, right? They were like, oh crap, we're about to be totally disintermediated. Well, good. Luckily for them, that wasn't true, but it should have been true.
One interesting thing, kind of on a different topic, but I read a statistic recently, like Bitcoin ordinals, either volume or the amount minted or something like that's down like 97%. That's been an interesting saga from that
they're
was
like
back
speed running the NFT story
in 6 months.
Yeah.
The mania, could this change everything? And then interestingly, all of like the discourse in Bitcoin, the Bitcoin community, like half really like it, half hated it, which I think is kind of a recurring theme with Bitcoiners generally. Anytime anything new is introduced, what's your kind of take on all of that?
Yeah, good question. And you're totally right. I mean, Bitcoiners are notoriously ornery and hostile to technological change on Bitcoin. I think in a lot of ways that's a positive. I think when you look at most other communities, they're aggressively interested in upgrades. So that's a differentiator, I would say. It's the most conservative development ecosystem in crypto, Bitcoin. So yeah, that is a recurring theme, Saul. And so I think that stat was from Cointelegraph and ultimately from DApp Radar. I saw that story, and I think we did some work. It's not down as bad as they thought, and that was trading volume, and it's not down 97%. But it's probably down like 70% from the peak. But also keep in mind, a lot of that volume was BS. Like it was BRC20 tokens, which is really terrible, stupid token standard. Like when we look at it, we really look at image-based ordinals because we think of, I know it's simplistic, and I know NFT bulls will say, well, they're more than just images. But like if we separate out and only look at the images, like which are sort of the classic digital collectible use case, like it's first of all, it's way fewer. There's maybe like 25 or 30 million inscriptions, but only 1.5 million of them are images. The vast majority of the rest is this text. This is essentially code for these stupid tokens that like is a terrible way to do tokens, by the way. There are even better ways to do tokens on Bitcoin than that. So anyway, yeah, when you calculate the volume down, it's including like the peak of that BRC20 mania, which is really stupid. I would say just broadly, like, who likes ordinals? Well, miners all are universally in favor of this type of activity. Any activity that increases fees, miners are in favor for, and many of them have been outwardly positive on ordinals specifically. But if they aren't, they in general are happy because they make more money when people transact. I think people worried about the long-term security budget of Bitcoin are happy now. And I say it that way because I think there are many people who are not worried about that for a variety of reasons. And I tend to be someone who's not worried about it. Doesn't mean I don't think about it, but I'm not worried. But anyone who's worried, right, likes the transaction fees. And then, I mean, it goes back to this old debate, and it's true on all blockchains, but Bitcoin was the iconic about what is this block space for, right? And I think Pete Rizzo, who's he's at Bitcoin Magazine. He's like the editor or something like that at Bitcoin Magazine, is a longtime journalist, used to be at CoinDesk. He had a great piece about a year or two ago about this dynamic, and he said that there were monetary maximalists, network maximalists, and platform maximalists. And these were sort of the three strands of maximalism in Bitcoin, with, of course, the monetary maximalists sort of dominating the current culture, right? Which is that the idea being that Bitcoin is primarily a monetary asset. First, it is a commodity money that challenges the global central banking, domination of fiat money. Like that is sort of the dominant cultural view in Bitcoin now. But there used to be a strong platform maximalism, which was that no, Bitcoin is primarily a platform upon which to build stuff. And this sort of like, even since ETH's launched, this fell out of favor, right? I mean, but Vitalik was a Bitcoiner, right? There was Satoshi had suggested, when people said, should we do what was it called, BitDNS, like on Bitcoin? He said, no, you know what? Actually, it's probably better to do that on a different chain, is what Satoshi said. But there were people who were thinking about building stuff on Bitcoin, and sort of the dominant view became that most of those things you needed to make Bitcoin a very composable platform would be too risky to its other good use cases, right? If we were to, and so people didn't build stuff on Bitcoin primarily, right? And I would say that, and the idea behind the network maximalism is like, well, it's actually a peer-to-peer network, and just think of it like that way primarily. But I think between the platform and the monetary thing, this is something where ordinals really stands out. It does represent a little bit of a resurgence of the platform maximalist concept, right? And I would say it's merely a strain in the Bitcoin culture. It is not dominant at this point. But right, the old view, people used to say that altcoins were test nets for Bitcoin, and that anything great that an altcoin came up for would eventually be incorporated into Bitcoin. Well, that's just objectively not what happened, right? Like clearly not what happened. But I think that was what a lot of people wanted for Bitcoin back in the day, and the whether or not using ordinals is how it happens at all, the mere fact that there is this ordinals concept now, I think it's breathed some fresh air into that concept for people that still believe in it, right? That you could build stuff on, the Bitcoin could be a place where you build rather than an asset that you own. I don't know how it plays out long term, but I've been, in that sense, I'm pretty encouraged. I mean, I like people doing weird stuff on Bitcoin. That's fine with me. I don't want us to have, break the 21 million hard cap. I don't want Bitcoin to become censored, right? There's plenty of red lines that I have, but if you're not crossing these red lines, I really don't care. If you pay fees, I'm fine if you use Bitcoin. And it's an interesting one. It's definitely different, right? I mean, the ordinal stuff is definitely different for Bitcoin. And it challenges a lot of narratives, right? I mean, it's just like people really are building some stuff on Bitcoin now. And like, that's pretty new.
How important do you think it is that Bitcoin maintains its number one spot? Because if Ethereum does manage to overtake it, suddenly you have a yield-producing asset. And then if we're talking about what's going to be a better store of value, arguably over the last 40 years, the best stores of value have been stocks and real estate. And both of those do produce assets. So is there a risk that Bitcoin could lose its meme status almost as the global reserve currency and digital gold?
Yeah. I think it's I really do think it's pretty unlikely, at least in the next 10 years, that alt L1 gas token or primary asset that powers a different blockchain would become more valuable than Bitcoin. I think that's unlikely. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. I think if it weren't the biggest, that would hurt its status. I certainly don't disagree with that. I don't know if it in the long run in the biggest version of this possible future, if it is that big a deal. Gold is not the most valuable asset. It's big, right? But stocks are bigger, right? I mean, it's like, so I think it depends on what Bitcoin becomes. But if we were to say it's only going to be digital gold, but it does achieve digital gold status, let's say that, right? Well, then it shouldn't be the biggest. I mean, if the Ethereum, honestly, if it's bigger than Ethereum, Solana, et cetera, DeFi world, then that's really more of a story than that those have failed. Because I think if we're going to have all financial services on a blockchain, like there's no way one single digital gold asset should actually be worth more than all of that. So, I guess I'm of a few minds. I mean, I do think it matters. I do think, don't get me wrong, if Ethereum flipped Bitcoin, there'd be a lot of smoke. People would be throwing a lot of smoke, and you'd see a lot of cope and seethe on the Bitcoin side. You'd see a lot of grave dancing from Ethereans, and it would just it would harm, I think, the Bitcoin story in the short term. But I don't think it's the end of the world. It is just one asset, right? I mean, in order to flip Bitcoin, dude, ETH has to have literally 75 potential blockchain use cases that everyone's juggling, claiming is going to be good, while none of them are really hitting. You know what I mean? It's a lot. It's a big giant, carnival that they're running over there on the Ethereum blockchain, and they still haven't surpassed the one asset. So I don't think in the end, like, and again, a yield bearing asset, like you can be productive with your ETH, right? And so, look, I mean, imagine you're sitting in a non-yield bearing asset now. What are you, like, crazy? Yields are 5% in a money market fund. So I hear you. I mean, there's a lot that makes sense. I don't think of it as, a store of value doesn't have to earn yield, to be honest. Like, it depends on what you think of as store of value, but store of value is supposed to be a relatively stable and credible asset, right? Gold doesn't earn any yield, right? But it's been used for thousands of years for wealth preservation. So I don't know. Does that answer it? I'm kind of saying like yes, but no, maybe so.
There we go. Cover all your bases.
Exactly. I'm still thinking back how I came out super spicy on this depend question. I want to apologize to my dreamers out there who are trying to build for a better decentralized future. I'm super in support of that. Just like, being spicy on this particular use case.
So one of the many kind of hats you wear in your current role is interfacing with the world of institutional crypto. Are you noticing any themes or interest areas? I mean, obviously, we're all kind of waiting for this decision on the Grayscale trust, but anything else, and kind of what you think is going to play out on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, in crypto investing world right now, like in markets, like there is a distinct lack of catalysts. I mean, that's why you saw volatility basically compressed to historic lows, and obviously it came up a little bit as we moved lower last week. But I really there's just not much going on, honestly. Like you got some of these court cases which could have positive or negative catalysts, right? Whether it's Grayscale and the SEC or the Coinbase stuff or who knows what else, right? Like otherwise, like we're looking at a macro situation that is was supposed to be deteriorating, and instead stocks have had one of their best years on record this year, but now looks like it may be deteriorating again, right? It's not clear. You get the problems with China, you get the rate situation, the Fed still doesn't look like they're about to halt hikes, right? Like a lot of people waiting for shoes to drop on macro, and then you just don't see that much positive stuff on the horizon to propel crypto forward. Now, new apps that launch that are wildly popular, that could be a catalyst, right? Like I said, I mean, a Grayscale victory, I mean, our view on this is like the best case scenario for Grayscale is that it's essentially just kicked back into the SEC process, right? And maybe there's some mean language from the judges about the SEC, which would make it like slightly better, right? Like, but the case does not result in an ETF being approved, right? So like, it's like, we got to be realistic about what a win here looks like for the market. It's not that impactful. Like I said, I think the best case scenario is that they say a bunch of mean things about the SEC in the opinion. Like that would be, it's probably about as good as you would get from a knockout victory there. But also you have no idea when these rulings come, right? Like they take as long as they want. So it's like very, very hard to, prognosticate market impact when you have no idea when it's going to happen. And let's be real. I mean, I think the market is pretty convinced that it will be a Grayscale victory at this court. Elliot Stein, who's a senior litigation analyst at Bloomberg, pegged the likelihood at 70% likely that Grayscale prevails in its case there. But we don't know what's going to happen. It could be the opposite for all we know. I mean, court cases are, and I'm saying this is because there's so many potential catalysts out here that are court related. And it's like, you really have no way to know what's going to happen. And I was saying one of the things that surprised me about the SEC's approach is that they're just willing to roll the dice in so many court cases when they could undertake comprehensive and formal rulemaking process, right? And look, they could win in these cases, some of them, but they could also lose. And they could, and losses for the SEC, depending on the case and the circumstances, could result in significantly curtailed power for the regulator. So like, it's kind of, and the reality in court is you really just don't know what's going to happen. Like almost anything can happen. So like, it's kind of crazy as a strategy, in my opinion, to have so much of their, regulatory strategy right now be related to court cases. And the same thing is true for the market in general. And these catalysts is like, again, like I say, we can't count on outcomes. We don't know when they'll come. We don't know what they'll be. They can also take a really long time, right? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like, and then outside of that, I mean, yeah, when I talk to, that's what they're looking at. They're looking, some potential catalysts. You have the possibility of ETH, futures ETFs people are thinking about in the fall. You've got all these court case outcomes. Maybe you have legislation, although I mean it's looking a bit precarious. But you have the market structure bill and the stablecoin bill in the U.S. House that could be a catalyst, right? But outside of that, I mean, no one thinks that like there's no upgrade for ETH that's going to like change the game. No one's like, oh my God, when that big Solana upgrade comes, like that's going to totally alter market structure, right? There's really, I wouldn't say there's very many native crypto catalysts that people see on the horizon. I would say the Bitcoin halving is in April. That, historically has mattered. Theoretically, it should matter half as much every time, right? And on an absolute basis, like, having from 900 coins issued per day to 450 is a pretty small change on an absolute basis at this point. So its impact, like on actual supply side economics, like supply and demand, should not be that big. But the marketing event, the quadrennial story, the fact that like that could still be positive. So, and then of course next year you have the presidential election, and I think next year is the year for it to be pretty spicy in markets, right? You could have a Bitcoin ETF, you could have presidential election, it shakes things up, right? You could have the Bitcoin halving, et cetera. So like I think markets are poised to be more interesting in 24 than they've been in 23.
I think I share a slightly similar sentiment to you in that I think macro could change, but and hopefully that will produce some bullish tailwinds for crypto. But it's kind of hard right now to see what the crypto, internal changes are going to be that are suddenly going to drive loads and loads of people, as we had with DeFi summer, really, the last time. Obviously, at the moment, we've got some excitement around friend.tech. Just wondering if you think maybe that's going to be the thing to really drive people into crypto rails.
Yeah. On-chain summer, right? It's what Coinbase calls it. I was calling it L2 season. Yeah. I mean, I like I said, an app could propel, right? Or like, let's say, Call of Duty adds NFTs finally or whatever, right? Like, or that a crypto native game has a breakout hit and becomes just like worldwide famous, right? And popular. Like those could alter. And that, to be honest, those could also happen at any time. I don't think friend tech is it. There's obviously demand for some kind of better social media situation, whether it's because of Elon Musk and X or people's longstanding problems with Facebook's properties and whatnot. Like, I mean, I haven't been on Facebook in like 15 years or something, 10 years. There's obviously demand for some improvement in the social media experience, right? Like for no matter which side of whether you think they don't censor enough or they censor too much, like everyone's mad at big tech, right? Both political parties in the US, both mad at it. So in that sense, I think something like friend tech, which, doesn't approach all of those problems, but does something, I would say, is more about creator economy monetization problems, which people also have issues with. I think just the excitement around it shows that there's demand for change here. I don't think that, owning a key to a influencer's private chat is going to be the killer use case, but we'll see. Maybe they'll come out with some new stuff. I think I really liked about it more than anything is that I just learned about these, but the add to home screen, the progressive web app, big reason why it's been successful, right? And that doesn't have to be approved by the various app stores either. So that's quite interesting. Wonder what else people will build with that.
Yeah, it's only, I think, recently that you could do push notifications with PWAs. And so that was like the key thing, I guess, that the developer decided to leverage for. And I agree. I think we'll start to see a lot more of these crypto apps. A lot of them are already switching over to PWAs as we speak, kind of use those to enable the wallets. That plus the embedded MPC wallets, which I'm very bullish on, I think will basically be how almost everyone uses crypto on their mobile phone until we kind of figure out account abstraction, and that's more of a mainstream thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, let's not even talk about account abstraction. I'm literally waiting for someone to explain this to me offline. Like I've got someone writing a report on this. I haven't bothered to follow this concept, to be honest. But yes, I agree that the embedded MPC stuff is really powerful. And yeah, I mean, friend.tech is easy to use. They did the main thing, right? They hope maybe other features will come soon, but they started with the speculation. And that's, Dave, you mentioned GambleFi, which I love that. I just call that gambling, but yes, absolutely massive use case for global decentralized blockchains, right? And actually, I'm actually shocked that it hasn't been a bigger part of the crypto story over the years, right? You'd had those like prediction markets, right? Augur was going to change the world back in the day again. I still love the idea, but it didn't change the world. And I'm actually kind of surprised because the global decentralized, right? Gambling is as old as humanity, but it's an incredibly regulated activity. So like cross-jurisdictional, global jurisdictional arbitrage platform, which is what public blockchains can be. Kind of surprised it hasn't taken off more, but obviously that's a big part of friend tech. I'm I'm taking the high road here and saying it's emblematic of people's desire for change in social media, right? Well, it's also gambling, and people like gambling.
Yeah. No, I think it's kind of a thesis on social, at least in terms of how crypto will help out or improve social 10 to 100x. Like my thesis has always been it must rely or heavily use kind of financialization or speculation, because those in crypto, to your point, are way better than doing it through the traditional rails because it's global and permissionless. And I think that's kind of what friend.tech was able to put front and center, was this idea that your shares or keys, as they call them now, could kind of moon as a creator. And then you have all the bots come in and all the excitement and activity. I mean, the app itself, there's nothing to do on it. It's literally, especially if you don't have a key, you can just look at the potential rooms you can buy, right? There's no discovery even.
I agree. Then as part of the L2 thing, this is another thing I've appreciated a lot about the Solana world, and I know it's actually kind of changing, right? There's some talk of you guys are going to have to become layered at some point, right? There's some talk of layers even with Solana in some ways, maybe not, but I yeah, well, even leaving aside scale with hardware, which I think is a reasonable thesis, for building a blockchain, it's that there are composability issues, and a world that's L2s all the way down is like a world where it's hard to do stuff across these L2s. I don't want to have to go to MetaMask and add a whatever new thing all the time. It's annoying, right? So I get that. I don't know if they're going to solve that one day by making the L2s all feel like L1 or something. I don't know, but that's something that is interesting to me, because even you're on the OP stack and it's there's a bunch of others, but they're not actually connected. It's sort of like the Cosmos. It's like turning the Cosmos thesis on its head, right? It's app chains, but there's no hub, or I guess ETH is the hub. But you can't easily. It's kind of the same problem Cosmos had, which was no one's actually connecting to the hub, right? I don't know. That's something I worry about. And I don't worry about it. I think about it in terms of scaling blockchains, and I like a layered approach personally, because I want to maintain the fidelity of the underlying L1. As a Bitcoiner, that's very important to me. Like I said, Bitcoiners don't want to sacrifice the fidelity of the L1's properties in order to gain things like, UX improvements, right? It's too high a bar. And in that sense, a layered approach is safer. But yeah, I mean, you can't I can't move from base to Arbitrum really at all. I have to go all the way back through the L1. So it's is that really, aren't we creating silos now? It's just kind of a weird, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, you think of something like price discovery. How does that happen when you could be offered different prices across all of these L2s, L3s? And obviously you can maybe try and join it all together and finally come up with some answer, but you're going to have massive latency. The purple.
Well, you're just going to have market makers across all of them setting the prices, right? They're going to be on all of them. I mean, that's honestly, I don't think, I agree. It's just clearly inefficient, right? If you're breaking the market into a bunch of different, liquidity pools, there should always be one liquidity pool, right? I mean, American capital markets are the deepest and most liquid in the world because it's NASDAQ and NYSE. It's two places, right? If there were 50 places, then it would be all disaggregated and annoying, but you would still have high frequency market makers setting the prices across all of them, right? Someone else, you, the user, would not be able to go across all of those fragmented liquidities, no doubt. But you're not going to be the one that has to do it, right? There's going to be pros that arb that and bring those prices in line and all that. But again, yeah, it's just patently inefficient.
Have you found it surprising that Base, I think, is now already doing more transactions than Optimism and Arbitrum? Because just from if you just look at it, you're saying, okay, well, it's far more centralized and it doesn't even have a token, and yet it is seeing a lot more uptick. So yeah, just wondering how you're seeing that, and do you think it's going to last?
That's a great question. I don't know. It's been surprising. There's some meme value. I mean, I think it's, you've got a large public company promoting it. I don't know. I mean, yes, I've seen that daily. What was it, DAU maybe the chart, or is it transactions? I can't recall, but yes. I think probably most of that is friend.tech. But I've been surprised, and I don't know how long it will last. I think, look, people don't care. Do you need decentralization for your social media token? Maybe. I mean, more than probably need it more than if you were, trading in a physical real estate where you actually have to know the party directly anyway. Okay. And you need it less certainly than you do if you have global decentralized money. Right. So, but I think some people are going to realize people will eventually gravitate to the higher fidelity, the things that are fast and secure. And typically that means decentralized. And so the game has been trying to be decentralized and fast. I know this game Solana's been working on a long time. My point is the base is not very decentralized, right? Maybe that might even be a charitable way of saying it. And I don't know, people don't care right now for the use case they're using it for, but eventually that will matter. And so I can't imagine if it in its current form that, base is the solution to the global block space problem.
Yeah, I think what it does is it provides a good user experience that doesn't require $5 of gas to do anything on chain.
Right.
And what they have going for them is the wallet, Coinbase wallet and Coinbase, the website, both make it really easy to bridge fiat dollars into base and out of base. So I think that's going to probably propel them to be, in my view, like the next kind of BSC, the go-to default, just slightly more scalable EVM solution for both developers and users. And I think it's like higher level though. Like the key challenge for Solana that these EVM chains, L2s, and ETH as well, just has a ton of money parked there already, and it makes it really easy to just move into any of these ecosystems and move out without needing a ton of bridge liquidity. And that feels to me like, I guess the question is, do we see that changing? Do we see new monetary flows going into a completely new layer one, whether it's Solana or even these challenger ones? Like how did they solve that problem? Because that feels to me like the actual key challenge here, as we try to skate towards retail adoption.
Yeah, it is a challenge. That's sort of a Lindy effect, and
yeah,
I think to the extent that like all L1 communities have been successful is they've sort of just built their, rather than vampire, although maybe they vampire attack a little bit on the existing ones, they just built their own, right? And Solana's done a good job at this. There is but yes, I mean, you're competing against Ethereum and Bitcoin communities where there's a lot of value locked there, right? And that's going to be very hard this is why we said, I mean, Ethereum and its smart contract competitors, like it's Ethereum's game to lose. Like it is. I mean, Ethereum has by far the most developer and financial mind share in crypto, I would say. And look, a person can only work on that's not actually true, but for the, you could say pretty much a person can only work on one thing at a time, right? Like you can't have, I don't know of a single Solana and ETH core dev, right? No one's core deving both, right? And so you're competing for the same developer mindshare. And theoretically at the app layer, you're also competing for developers and builders. And then of course you can't double spend capital, really. I mean, you could recursively loan it and whatnot, sure. And DeFi, I guess for every rule, crypto often has an exception. But in general, right, you can't double spend. So you got to have, if your cash is in point A, it can't also be in point B. So like there's competition there, no doubt. That's one of the weirdest things about this space that's super interesting is that people own financial interest in the early stage tech at scale. It's strange. It causes all types of interesting stuff.
I'm not sure how long you've been in the space, Alex, but I feel like maybe once people have been here for so long, it's kind of hard to keep looking at all of these new chains, new inventions, new narratives which are going out. It reminds me of like Kobe, for example, listening to him when he was still around for the last year or two. It just sounded like he'd sort of given up. So I feel like you've been here for a while, and yet you've got your own research hub, you've got your own podcast. So what's keeping you going? What's keeping you optimistic?
Yeah, it really is hard not to become cynical, I think, because that's what I was saying before. Like I think the key for me is making sure that I'm always willing to be proven wrong here. And again, we'll go back to my rant on DPen. Like I'm willing to be proven wrong. I'm hoping that I will be, right? I say this about tokenization all the time too, right? We looked into all of this and there was reasons why it didn't make sense, or we didn't think it would happen anytime soon. We were right. It didn't happen soon. Maybe it is starting to happen now. Gosh, I hope it does, because, a public blockchain is a significantly better place to record and transfer value. I think that's just a fact. It's very, very good for that. That's pretty much, in my view, almost all that it is good for, but there's a lot to unlock there from that. And so, yeah, but it's, the reason that happens when you're in crypto for a long time is that we've already talked about this stuff. Dude, like we've been talking about this for 8 years. People come around, they're like, oh man, what about the Ethereum name service? I'm like, Satoshi literally proposed that. Like, right? Namecoin. It was the first altcoin. Like it's literally like, now, does it mean it was a bad idea? ENS is a huge project. It's a legitimate idea, right? Like on ETH or whatever. So, but it's kind of like, dude, everything old is new again. Like that's why I tell people, researchers that I work with, like, dude, like if you don't know about the history of Bitcoin, you really don't know about crypto, because so much of what is being done now was thought up by Bitcoiners, or rejected as something not to do on Bitcoin that resulted in the creation of the altcoin that you, random Anon, just heard about, right? Like it all stems from the if you go to bitcointalk.org and reread the old threads, like almost every idea that people are doing in crypto today was contemplated already 10 years ago. That doesn't take away from the ideas, and certainly doesn't take away from the technological innovation that we are seeing. There's plenty of innovation since then, no doubt. But I'm just saying, it can get hard to hear people, think boys mansplaining some concept to me that I read about 10 years ago as if it's some new idea, and that happens a lot, right? So I would say, that being said, I would say that's some of the reason you get, some cynicism from people that have been in crypto a long time. That being said, I am very excited by a lot of innovation happening, and I'm really interested in adoption. And what I mean by that is I spend most of my time trying to determine if adoption is occurring. When I see it happening somewhere, I want to know why, right? Like, and that story has been interesting and changing the whole time. But it's a grind, right? Every quarter in crypto is like 5 years in human time, right? I mean, it's like I started going gray. This is literally from last year. This is just 2022 on this beard. So, yeah, it's exciting. I will say it's also, I don't want to at all make it sound like I'm critical of young new people getting excited about crypto use cases. And in fact, that's one of the things I like most about my job, is that I work with a lot of young, energetic people who are super bullish on crypto. And they also help, if you sit around in your boomer aloneness, waxing poetic about how, dude, we already talked about this 10 years ago on bitcointalk.org. Yeah, you're going to get cynical and burned out. I think if you get into these communities and realize that there is still a lot of excitement about crypto at all levels of career experience in all sectors. Like, I mean, every day I meet new people who are very, very bullish on crypto. Also, they're all a lot smarter than we used to be. Like, somebody I talked to, they're like, yeah, I just got into crypto back in 2021. I'm like, dude, that was 5 seconds ago. And then I'm like, wait a sec, that was 2 years ago, right? Actually, wow, if you've been following it for 2 years, you actually might know what you're talking about, right? To me, that makes it seem like you're a noob. So, but you're not, because that was 2 years ago. So, like, people are a lot smarter on crypto than all people, like, right? We're all getting smarter about what it is, how it works, what it's going to be good for. And that also helps keep me energized.
Right. We obviously covered a lot of topics, a lot of spicy takes throughout. Maybe a bit of a closing question here. Something I think about a lot is, and kind of piggybacking on this broader point we just made, I've been in crypto a while. My first interaction with it was through Bitcoin. I think a lot of people's first interaction in 2017 might have still been Bitcoin, but starting to be more of these altcoins that came out in the ICO boom. And then to your point, 2021, I think a lot of people just literally went directly to either DeFi or an NFT, straight to ETH. I mean, if you had to make a guess, like whenever this next kind of cycle comes about and adoption ratchets upwards, what do you think is going to be the key? Are people going to even touch or care about Bitcoin? Are they going to go, is it going to be an ETH? Is it going to be an L2, or maybe one of these really scalable all L1s? Like, how do you see that playing out?
It's great. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's more likely to be Bitcoin related than people realize because of regulatory reasons, I think, including the potential launch of a Bitcoin ETF. So I think a lot of people's quote unquote, a lot of new entrants exposure to crypto in a next bull run will be through a regulated financial product like a Bitcoin ETF. And so it'll be Bitcoin, which is different than, I think I totally agree, Saul, with your mini history there of how it worked, right? And even in the ICO era, like you had to buy Bitcoin to then take it to buy ETH, right? Like, I mean, the way the sort of on-ramps worked, right? And most trading pairs were Bitcoin denominated, actually, which they're not now. Right now we have stables. And so like that has changed like Bitcoin's utility in crypto markets from off ramp to like now just asset, right? And that probably does dampen demand for it in comparison to prior ones, right? But I do think because of regulatory stuff, and by the way, because DeFi and NFTs everybody already like knows about, right? They're not going to be novel the next time. I think Bitcoin has a better chance of being the reason again. But I will also say there could be, new apps or categories of apps we don't even know about. It could be DePIN. It absolutely could be. It could be games. I mean, I continue to think the biggest black swan dark horse is like a Call of Duty quality game that has crypto in it. Like that would absolutely just rock the entire space and the world. One breakout hit would be a game changer, no pun intended. So that could be the reason, right? It's really hard to know, but I don't think it's not going to be enthusiasm around infrastructure. Okay, like we have all the infrastructure, right? So it's got to be app level, and I think it's more likely to be asset, Bitcoin or ETH asset as the sort of breakout thing, because we're likely to have better and easier market access vehicles and that's the people that are new entrants in this. Dude, all the people that like this stuff, there's no degens on the sidelines that haven't heard about crypto that aren't already interested in it, right? Like it's not going to come from crypto native, like, DeFi summer type use case. I don't think, like, we already have all that. Like, so it would need to be a game-changing new space like that on chain, or more likely, I think the new entrants are going to be traditional investors.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess we'll have to all keep our eye out for the ETFs potentially down the line. Alex, this has been an awesome discussion. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your wisdom from all of these cycles you've been through.
Hey, and I want to tell you guys push back, Dave. You're giving me some good clap back. Like, I tell my researchers, like, I really believe in argumentation as a way to arrive at truth, that basically you have to try on arguments to see how good they are, right? Like you actually have to, that's why I like opinionated discussions, because I don't want to say that the trope like strong opinions weakly held, but it is kind of like that. Like I think people that I'm very supportive of talking a bunch of smack and having somebody tell me I'm wrong. Like I'd much rather do that. And I'm throwing this disclaimer out. Like everything I said could be wrong. I'm happy if it is, right? Like come and tell me, put it in the comments. Otherwise, this has been great as always. I'm a big fan of you guys, and we can go wrong. 3 dudes in black tees. Podcast.
Got the uniform.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Great
Alex.
To be here.
Awesome. And for our listeners, we will be chatting about our episodes on Thursdays on Twitter Spaces, so feel free to jump on stage and chat about this episode.